The day looked ordinary to everyone who was there. People were moving in all directions, some in a hurry, some walking slow, some standing still with tired faces. The air was filled with small sounds, footsteps, distant voices, the soft hum of machines, and the quiet rhythm of daily life. No one was paying attention to anything special. No one thought this day would matter. But for a small girl, this day felt very heavy. She walked beside an adult, her hand held tightly. The grip was not gentle. It was firm, controlling, and constant. The girl did not complain. She did not pull away. She did not cry. She had learned that silence was safer. Her steps were short and careful, matching the pace set for her. She kept her head low, watching the ground instead of the people around her. To anyone watching, she looked like a shy child. Quiet children were common. Some people even smiled softly at her, thinking she was just tired or bored. But inside her chest, her heart was beating fast. Every sound felt louder than it should. Every movement around her made her body tense. She was alert in a way no child should have to be. She remembered being told to behave, to not speak unless spoken to not look around too much, to stay close. She followed every rule because she believed it kept her safe, even though it did not feel safe at all. Fear had become something normal to her, something she carried quietly. The place they were walking through was crowded but open. There were signs on the walls, bright lights above, and long paths people followed without thinking. The girl had been here before, but she never felt comfortable. She felt small here, smaller than usual, surrounded by adults who were busy with their own lives. She felt invisible. The adult beside her kept checking the surroundings, not in a relaxed way, but with quick glances and stiff movements. There was a sense of urgency in every step. The girl noticed this. She noticed everything. She had learned to read moods without words. She could feel tension like a cold wind on her skin. As they moved forward, something caught her attention. At first, she thought it was just another person in uniform. But then she saw the dog. The dog was calm, focused, and walking beside a uniformed officer. Its movements were smooth and confident. Its eyes scanned the area with quiet intelligence. Unlike other dogs she had seen, this one was not distracted. It walked with purpose, trained to notice what others missed. The girl's breathing changed, very slightly. So slightly that no one else noticed. Her eyes lifted for just a moment, careful not to turn her head too much. She had been taught not to stare, but she had also been taught something else, long ago, in a place that felt far away now. She remembered a classroom. She remembered sitting on a small chair, her feet not touching the floor. She remembered a friendly officer visiting, talking about safety in a gentle voice. There had been pictures, simple words, and clear instructions. One lesson had stayed with her more than the others. If you are ever in trouble and you cannot speak, look for help that cannot ignore you. She remembered the dog from the pictures. She remembered being told that police dogs were trained to notice signals, not loud signals, small ones, careful ones, signals made by people who could not ask for help in normal ways. At the time, it had sounded like a story, something unlikely, something meant to make children feel safe. She never thought she would need it, but now the dog was real, and it was close. Her hand tightened around the small object she had been holding since earlier. It was nothing important, something small and ordinary, but her fingers felt cold around it. Her thoughts moved quickly, faster than she expected. Fear told her to stay quiet. Hope told her this might be her only chance. The adult beside her did not notice her change. The grip stayed firm. The walking did not slow. They were almost passing the officer and the dog now. Just a few steps away. The girl felt her heart beating so loud she was sure someone would hear it. She kept her face calm. She had learned how to do that too. She did not look scared. She did not look excited. She looked like a child simply walking beside an adult. As they came closer, the dog's head turned slightly. Just for a moment. Its eyes passed over the crowd, then settled briefly in her direction. It was not a long look. It did not seem dramatic, but something in that look made her chest tighten. This was it. She remembered the instruction clearly now. Drop something small. Make it look like an accident. Then give the signal. Her fingers loosened. The small object slipped from her hand and hit the floor with a soft sound that blended into the noise around them. No one reacted. No one looked down. It was exactly what she hoped for. She slowed her step just enough to tap her shoe twice against the ground. The movement was gentle. It could easily be mistaken for nervous behavior. To anyone else, it meant nothing. But to the dog, it meant something else entirely. The girl straightened again and kept walking. Her face still calm, her eyes back on the floor. She did not look at the dog. She did not look at the officer. She did not want to draw attention too soon. She had done her part. Now, she had to wait. Inside, everything felt frozen. She wondered if it worked. She wondered if she remembered it correctly. Doubt crept in, heavy and painful. What if nothing happened? What if this was just another moment where hope led to nothing? The adult beside her noticed the dropped object and tightened their grip. There was a sharp pull, a silent warning. The girl did not resist. She had learned when to stay still. They took another step forward. Behind them, the police dog slowed. The officer felt the change immediately. The leash became tense. The dog's posture shifted, alert and focused. This was not random. This was trained behavior. The dog's ears lifted. Its attention locked onto something specific. The officer scanned the area, trying to see what the dog was responding to. From the outside, nothing looked wrong. Just people walking, just another normal moment, but the dog stopped. The girl felt it before she saw it. The pace around her changed. The grip on her hand hesitated. Something was different. She did not turn around, but she knew. Her signal had been seen in that instant. Her fear did not disappear, but it changed. It became something sharper, mixed with a fragile hope. She did not know what would happen next. She did not know if she would be believed. She did not know if this would truly help her. All she knew was that, for the first time in a long while, someone had noticed, and the next few seconds would change everything. The moment the small object hit the ground, the world around her seemed to slow. People kept moving, talking, laughing, completely unaware that something important was happening just a few steps away. She kept her head down and continued walking, making her small, careful tap against the floor twice. Just as she had been taught, the sound was quiet, but it carried a meaning only one being in the crowd could understand. The police dog, trained to notice even the smallest gestures, froze. Its ears perked up, and it turned its head subtly. The handler felt the tension in the leash immediately. The dog was alert in a way that made him stop and observe closely. He scanned the crowd, trying to understand what had caught the dog's attention. Nothing seemed unusual to anyone else. The girl, still walking quietly, did not make a sound, her face calm as stone. Her mind racing with fear and hope. Every step she took was measured, but every movement of her body was alive with hidden signals. Her fingers fidgeted slightly with the small objects she had let fall. Her eyes darted quickly but inconspicuously to the side to check the dog's reaction, and her breathing was controlled so as not to reveal her fear. Inside, her heart was pounding like a drum. She had never felt more exposed in her life, yet she knew that keeping calm was the only way to survive. The adult beside her did not notice anything. Their eyes were fixed forward, their grip firm on her hand. They moved like a shadow over her small presence, guiding her as if she were nothing more than a piece of the scenery. The girl stayed obedient, following every instruction silently. She had learned long ago that resistance could be dangerous, that silence was sometimes her only shield. The dog continued to watch, its body tense, ready to react at a moment's notice. It was trained to notice subtle gestures, micro-movements that could easily be ignored. The tap of the girl's shoe, the way she had dropped the object, the slight hesitation in her stepple combined into a signal the dog understood perfectly. It was a silent message of danger, of someone in need. The handler noticed the change in the dog instantly. The leash became firm in his hand, and he stepped closer, trying to keep his presence calm and authoritative. He knew the dog well. He trusted its instincts, its training. The dog was never wrong when it acted with such precision. He scanned the surroundings again, looking for what the dog had focused on. His eyes landed on the small girl walking beside the adult. She seemed ordinary to anyone else. But to him, something about her posture, her movements, her subtle gestures told a story. The girl felt the change in the dog's behavior, a small shift in energy that only someone paying attention could notice. She did not turn to look, but she sensed that help was now closer than she had dared to imagine. The tension in the adult's grip was still there, but the dog had positioned itself between her and the adult subtly, a protective barrier that might save her if anything went wrong. She kept walking calmly, making it look as if nothing had happened, but inside, she felt the tiniest spark of hope. Around them, people continued their routines. Some glanced curiously at the dog, noticing the sudden pause in its steps, but most paid no attention. Life carried on as usual, completely unaware that a single, quiet gesture from a small girl had just set a chain of events into motion. It was a moment so small that it could have been missed entirely. Yet it was powerful enough to change everything in the next few seconds. The handler whispered a word to the dog, a command in their secret code, soft but firm. The dog responded immediately, moving slightly to position itself more directly in front of the girl, between her and the adult. The shift was subtle but deliberate. The adult beside her noticed the movement in the dog and stiffened, sensing something was off. They tried to quicken their pace to pull the girl along, but the dog did not move aside. It stood firm, unwavering. The girl's mind raced. She knew she had to stay calm. She could not look back. She could not scream. Any sign of panic could ruin everything. She remembered the training from that distant classroom, the officer who had taught children to use small, secret signals. She had practiced them only once, long ago, as a game. She had never imagined she would need them for real. Now, the training was no longer a game. It was survival. The object in her hand, the tap of her shoe, the quiet control of her movements, it all mattered. She could feel her pulse in her ears, loud and insistent, yet she did not let it show. She did not allow herself to flinch or react outwardly. Every muscle in her body was tense, ready to act if needed. But she moved as if nothing was wrong. The dog growled softly, a low warning sound that drew the attention of a few nearby people. They glanced around curious, but saw nothing alarming. The handler's eyes were fixed on the girl. He noticed the faint tremble in her hand, the careful control in her step, and the subtle signals she was sending without speaking. He understood immediately that she was in distress. The dog had found someone who needed protection. The adult beside her noticed the dog and tried to pull the girl faster. But the dog positioned itself directly in their path. It was trained to protect, trained to respond, and trained to follow cues from the person it was protecting. The adult tried again to take control, but the dog would not yield. Its stance was firm, commanding, impossible to ignore. It was a silent guardian, reacting to the signals that the girl had given without words. The girl felt a tiny sense of relief. She did not know if the dog could truly save her. But for the first time in a long while, she felt that someone else was aware of her situation. The fear was still there, sharp and insistent, but now it was paired with a fragile hope that she had never experienced. The tension around her did not vanish, but it shifted. It became something that could be managed, something that could be overcome if she continued to act carefully. She kept walking, pretending to be calm, pretending that nothing unusual was happening. Her small signals continued, controlled and deliberate. She dropped her gaze, kept her steps measured, and allowed her fear to be hidden beneath a mask of composure. She could see the dog's ears twitch occasionally, its body responding to her signals, but she did not look directly at it. She knew that, to appear normal, she had to keep her focus ahead. The handler kept his hand on the leash, his eyes scanning constantly. He noticed the adult's stiff movements, the tension in their grip, and the subtle cues from the girl. Every detail mattered. Every micro-movement was a piece of the puzzle that told him this was not a normal situation. He knew that if he acted carefully, it could prevent something terrible from happening. The crowd around them remained unaware. People walked past, carried on with their own lives, oblivious to the silent drama unfolding just a few feet away. A man pushing a cart paused briefly at the dog's growl, then moved on. A woman with a stroller glanced at the girl, smiled at her quiet demeanor, and kept walking. No one knew that the girl's careful, hidden signals were about to change everything. The girl felt a flicker of courage. It was small and fragile, but it was there. She realized that she had done the right thing, even though she had been scared. She had acted without words, without calling for help, and yet someone, the dog, trained and alert, had noticed. She had sent a message in silence, and it had been received. The dog shifted its position slightly, moving closer to the girl without breaking its stance. The handler whispered another command, soft but firm. The dog responded instantly. The adult beside the girl realized that the dog was not just reacting randomly. It was focused, alert, protective. Their grip on the girl tightened, but they could not move past the dog. The girl kept her calm exterior, but inside she felt a spark of hope that had been absent for so long. Every step forward was a careful dance, a balancing act between fear and courage. The girl had never felt more aware of her surroundings. Every glance, every movement, every small sound carried weight. She had become hyper-aware of everything around her, a skill born of necessity. The dog's presence amplified her sense of security, but it also reminded her of the danger she was in. The handler continued to observe, aware that this situation required patience. The dog's response was precise, deliberate. It would not act without cause, but it would respond immediately to the signals it had received. The girl had provided those signals, small and hidden, and now they were being honored. The next steps were critical, and the handler knew it. The adult beside the girl became increasingly uneasy. They glanced at the dog, tried to pull the girl along, but the dog's protective stance was unwavering. The tension in the air grew, subtle but palpable. People nearby might have felt it if they paid attention, but most did not. The girl stayed silent, her face calm, her mind racing, her body tense with anticipation. For the girl, time seemed to stretch and compress at the same time. Each second felt heavy with meaning. Each movement mattered. Each breath was a small victory. She had sent her signal. The dog had responded. Now it was a waiting game, but a waiting game filled with hope that she had not felt in a long time. The situation was fragile, delicate, and tense, but it was moving in the right direction as they continued. The dog maintained its protective position, its eyes locked on the adult beside the girl. The handler kept his voice low, calm, and steady, issuing commands that only the dog could understand. The girl felt a sense of relief, small but real. She knew that help was here, that someone was paying attention, that her silent signals had not gone unnoticed. And in that moment, she realized that even in the darkest situations, courage and careful action could create a path toward safety. The air around them was tense, but to the outside world, it still looked like a simple walk. People passed by without noticing the quiet drama unfolding. The small girl walked carefully, each step measured, her hand still holding the small object that had started everything. Her mind raced, but her face stayed calm. She knew that any sudden movement, any sound, could ruin the delicate balance she had created. She had sent the signal, and the dog had noticed. But now the hardest part was waiting and trusting that it would respond correctly. The police dog's eyes never left the girl. Every small gesture she made was amplified in its trained mind. The tap of her shoe, the slight movement of her hand, the way she held herself, all of it spoke louder than words. The dog knew something was wrong, even though the crowd around them could not see it. Its body shifted, moving subtly to block the adult beside her from getting too close. The handler's hand on the leash tightened slightly, his senses alert, ready to act at a moment's notice. The adult beside the girl began to notice that something was different. Their control over the situation seemed to weaken as the dog subtly intervened. They tried to pull her along faster, but the dog's presence made it difficult. The tension between them increased, small movements revealing a growing frustration. The girl kept walking, still calm, still composed, giving nothing away but inside. Fear and hope battled for dominance. A few people around them noticed the dog's unusual behavior. The low growl, the focused eyes, the sudden stop it made some of them pause. But none of them understood what it meant. To them, it was just a trained dog doing its job. To the girl, it was her only chance. The seconds felt like minutes. Every heartbeat was loud in her ears, and yet she remained quiet, moving like a shadow beside the adult. The dog made a soft noise, a warning that drew the handler's immediate attention. He moved closer, speaking quietly, issuing commands the dog understood, without alarming the crowd. The dog responded instantly, tightening its protective stance around the girl. It was a silent shield, ready to act, ready to protect, waiting for the right moment. The girl sensed the shift. Her hope grew fragile, but undeniable. She had done the right thing. Her secret signal, so small, so easy to miss, had been understood. But she knew this was not the end. The adult's grip tightened again, and the girl felt the pressure in her hand, a reminder that danger was still close. She stayed composed, breathing carefully, moving slowly, every motion calculated. The handler's eyes were sharp. He could see everything, notice every micro-expression, every slight tension in the adult's body, every tiny tremble in the girl's hand. He realized this was not just a random situation. Something was wrong, and the girl was the key. She had given a signal, and the dog had responded. The next steps depended on keeping her calm and keeping the adult distracted without escalating the situation. The dog growled softly, low and steady, a sound that seemed to ripple through the air. The adult glanced down, noticing it for the first time. Panic flashed in their eyes, quickly masked by a stiff expression. They tried to move faster, but the dog was too well trained. It shifted slightly, maintaining a protective position. The girl walked calmly, outwardly obedient, inwardly full of hope and fear mixed together. She had never felt more alert, more alive, more aware of every tiny movement around her. Her mind remembered everything she had learned in that distant classroom. The secret signals, the calm movements, the importance of silence. She had practiced it once, never imagining she would need it in a real moment of danger. Now, the practice was saving her life. The dog understood her signals perfectly. The handler understood the dog's behavior. It was a silent partnership, a chain of communication that no one else could see. The crowd began to notice the tension. Some people slowed down, curious about the dog's unusual behavior. A man with a shopping bag paused, glanced at the girl and the adult, then walked away. A woman with her child moved a little closer to the other side, giving them space. The world continued around them, unaware that a small gesture from a small girl had already started changing the outcome of this moment. The adult's attempts to control the girl became more urgent. They tugged slightly, tried to quicken the pace, but the dog's presence made it difficult. The dog's eyes never left the girl, alert and intelligent, reading every small signal she gave. The handler whispered another command, soft but clear. The dog responded immediately, adjusting its position slightly to make sure. The girl was protected from every angle. The girl felt the dog's presence like a shield. She kept her head down, her steps slow, her face calm, but inside she felt a spark of courage. She had done the right thing. She had reached out in silence, and the response was immediate. She did not know exactly what would happen next, but for the first time in a long while, she felt that she might actually be safe. The tension in the adult grew. They realized the dog was not going to let them control the situation easily. They tried again, but each movement was blocked subtly by the dog. The girl remained calm, giving no sign of fear or panic. She had learned long ago that outward calm could hide inner chaos. She relied on every bit of training and every bit of instinct she had. The dog had been trained to follow her signals, and now it was acting on them perfectly. Seconds stretched into what felt like hours. The handler's eyes never left the girl. He noted the slight changes in her posture, the careful control in her steps, the small signals that had started this chain of events. He knew that she had communicated danger without words, that she had given a signal only the dog could understand. Every moment mattered. Every movement was important. The dog's growl remained steady, low, and warning. The adult tried to ignore it, tried to move the girl along, but the dog was immovable. Its presence created a buffer, a protective space that made it clear the girl was not to be touched or pulled. She stayed calm, each step a small victory, each breath a careful measure of survival. She knew that her actions had created this opportunity, and she focused all her energy on maintaining control. The handler made a small gesture to the dog, barely noticeable, and the dog responded instantly. It was a silent conversation between trained professionals and a child in need. The adult beside her grew increasingly frustrated, but the dog's behavior made it impossible to escalate without drawing attention. The girl walked as if nothing had happened, but her mind was racing with every possible outcome, every possible response. She knew that patience and calm were her best tools. Around them, life continued. People moved past, some glancing curiously, some completely unaware. The small world around them seemed oblivious to the drama unfolding. Yet inside the bubble that surrounded the girl, the adult, the dog, and the handler, time moved differently. Every second was heavy with meaning, every motion deliberate, every breath a careful calculation. The dog continued to protect, standing firm and alert, ready to act if anything went wrong. The girl walked slowly, carefully, sending small signals that only the dog could understand. The handler observed every micro detail, interpreting the dog's responses, ensuring that the situation did not escalate. It was a delicate dance, silent and precise, a partnership between a small child and trained professionals that no one else could see. The adult tried one more time to pull the girl along. The dog positioned itself firmly, blocking any attempt to interfere. The girl's calm exterior never faltered. Her small gestures remained subtle but clear. The object in her hand, the tap of her shoe, the controlled movement of her body, all spoke volumes to the dog. The handler recognized every nuance, every tiny change. Knowing that the girl had just provided the means to prevent harm, in those moments the girl felt something shift inside her. A sense of hope, fragile but undeniable, began to take root. She had acted without words. She had given a silent signal, and the response had been immediate. For the first time, she felt that she might truly be safe. The dog's presence was a shield. The handler's awareness was a guide. And she had done it all quietly, cleverly, without anyone else noticing. The seconds continued to pass, stretching out with tension and meaning. Every movement mattered, every small gesture carried weight. The girl remained calm, poised, alert. The dog stayed close, protective, responsive. The handler monitored every detail, ready to act if needed. And the adult, despite attempts to maintain control, began to realize that the situation was no longer entirely in their hands. In those long, tense moments, a silent understanding formed between the girl and the dog. She had given the signal. The dog had responded. And now, the next few seconds could decide the outcome of everything. The world around them continued in its ordinary rhythm, completely unaware that a small girl's courage and a police dog's training had combined to create a chance for safety. The invisible thread between her and the dog was strong, unspoken, and powerful. A bond that could protect her if she stayed calm, patient, and observant. The tension in the air was thick, but the girl kept moving forward as calmly as she could. Her small hands clutched the object, her steps slow and careful, but each one carried the weight of the moment. The police dog stayed close, moving in a way that made the space between her and the adult impossible to cross. Every step she took, every tiny gesture, was part of a silent plan that had been set in motion the moment she had dropped the object and tapped her shoe. The dog understood immediately, and its response had started to change the course of events. The handler stayed alert, his eyes scanning everything around them. He knew that the girl had given a signal that the dog had understood. But he also knew that the adult beside her could become unpredictable. The tension in the adult's posture grew. They pulled slightly, tried to urge the girl forward faster, but the dog remained a firm barrier. The handler's hand on the leash was steady, controlling the dog without alarming the crowd, but ready to act at a moment's notice. Every small motion was precise, deliberate, part of a silent coordination that only they could understand. The girl's mind was racing, yet she forced herself to stay calm. She remembered all the instruction she had been given, all the lessons about signals, about patience, about controlling fear. She had practiced them before, and now those lessons were saving her life. Her face remained calm, neutral, innocent, even as inside she felt a mixture of fear, hope, and determination. She had sent the message, and the response had been immediate. But she knew the next steps were the most critical. Around them, people began to notice that something unusual was happening. The dog's intense focus, the way it moved with precision, drew a few glances. Some people slowed down, curious, but none could understand the true danger. The girl walked as if nothing was wrong, but her senses were heightened. She noticed every glance, every movement, every change in tone and posture. Her survival depended on her awareness, and she was fully aware. The adult began to show signs of frustration. Their movements became sharper, their grip on the girl's hand more controlling. But they could not cross the dog's barrier. The dog shifted slightly, positioning itself between them and the girl, its body language firm and protective. The handler whispered commands quietly, guiding the dog without alerting anyone else. The dog responded immediately, its actions fluid, precise, perfectly timed. The girl's heart pounded, but she kept walking. She had no way of knowing if anyone else had noticed her signals or the dog's response. But she had to assume that the dog and handler were her only allies. Every step, every gesture mattered. The small object in her hand, the controlled tap of her shoe, the calmness she displayed, it all combined to keep the dog focused and protect her from immediate harm. She had learned long ago that even the smallest action could have a huge impact. Suddenly, the adult tried something different. They shifted their weight, attempting to maneuver around the dog subtly, but the dog anticipated the movement, adjusting its stance instantly. Its growl was low, warning, but not loud enough to alarm the public. The handler tightened his grip on the leash and stepped forward slightly, reinforcing the dog's position. The girl's heart skipped a beat. She remained calm, but inside she felt the surge of fear that always came when danger was near. She reminded herself to breathe slowly, to move deliberately, to maintain control. The handler's eyes met hers briefly. In that moment, a silent understanding passed between them. He recognized the signals she had given, the courage it took to act without speaking, the precision of her actions. He adjusted the dog slightly, keeping it perfectly aligned between the girl and the adult. He whispered another command, soft and calm, and the dog responded immediately. The protective barrier remained firm, and the girl felt a faint sense of relief. The adult began to show signs of panic. They pulled harder, tried to break free. But the dog's unwavering presence and the handler's quiet control made it impossible. The girl stayed calm, her face expressionless, but her mind was working rapidly. She planned her next small movements, thinking ahead, calculating every possible outcome. She had to keep the dog's focus, maintain her own composure, and ensure the adult could not escalate the situation. Every second mattered. People in the surrounding area started noticing the intensity. A few paused, watching the dog and the trio with curiosity. Some whispered to each other, pointing subtly, but no one fully understood what was happening. The girl moved slowly, deliberately, keeping her calm facade. Inside, her adrenaline surged, but she controlled it, using it to stay alert and ready. She knew that any visible sign of fear could change the adult's behavior and put her at more risk. The dog continued to follow her signals, subtle as they were. Every small gesture, the way she adjusted her hand, the tilt of her head, the careful step she took was read and understood. The handler guided the dog quietly, adjusting its position only slightly, making sure the protective stance remained intact. The adult's frustration grew. They were beginning to understand that the situation was no longer entirely under their control. Every tug, every attempt to pull the girl forward, was blocked effortlessly, almost invisibly, by the dog. The girl remembered the words from her past lessons: stay calm, stay small, stay silent, and help will come. She had stayed small and silent, and now help was here in the form of the dog and the handler. She kept walking, her breathing even, her body controlled. Her mind focused on maintaining composure while thinking several steps ahead. She knew that the next moments would determine what happened. She had to be precise. The dog growled softly, low but firm, as the adult tried to maneuver again. The handler leaned slightly, guiding the dog with the leash in his body position, keeping the situation under control. The girl remained calm, giving subtle signals with her hand and foot, maintaining the connection that had started the moment she dropped the object. She had no way of knowing if the dog would act further, but she trusted its training, and that trust gave her a small sense of courage. The adult's panic became more evident. Their attempts to control the girl became sharper, more frantic, but the dog anticipated every move. Its growl remained steady, its body a firm wall between the girl and the threat. The handler's eyes were constantly scanning, making adjustments to maintain control without drawing attention. The girl's heart pounded, but her exterior remained calm. Every step she took was deliberate, every movement meaningful. People around them were starting to notice tension, spring quietly, but still unaware of the full danger. The girl's careful, silent communication with the dog and the handler had created a bubble of protection around her. She stayed calm, alert, and observant, knowing that the next seconds could either make her safe or put her in further danger. Her courage, silent but real, was holding the line. The adult tried one last time to pull her forward aggressively, but the dog moved subtly, adjusting its stance, blocking the attempt with perfect timing. The growl intensified just enough to warn without alarming the crowd. The handler leaned forward slightly, giving a gentle, precise command. The dog responded instantly, reinforcing the barrier. The girl's body remained calm, her mind sharp and alert. She had sent her signals, and now she had to wait for the next opportunity. A subtle shift occurred. The adult, realizing they could not control the girl, hesitated. The dog remained firm, its focus unwavering. The handler's presence ensured control, and the girl continued to move as though nothing unusual had happened, maintaining her calm demeanor. Inside, her relief grew, but she stayed silent and measured, knowing that patience was crucial. She had come this far by staying silent and alert, and the next step would bring the truth to light. The moments stretched as the small girl walked forward, every step calculated and calm. The police dog stayed close, a silent guardian responding to the signals she had sent. The handler's eyes never left the scene, monitoring the situation, ready to act if anything escalated. The adult beside her grew more tense, realizing that control was no longer in their hands. They tugged, tried to maneuver, tried to regain authority. But the dog's presence and the handler's careful guidance made it impossible. The girl walked as if nothing had happened, her calm exterior hiding the storm of fear, hope, and determination inside her. Suddenly, the adult made a sharp movement, attempting to pull the girl toward an exit that could have taken them out of the crowd and out of sight. But the dog anticipated it instantly, moving to block the path and issuing a low, warning growl. The handler adjusted the leash with subtle precision, guiding the dog while keeping his voice quiet and calm. The crowd around them remained largely unaware, though a few curious onlookers paused, sensing the tension without understanding its cause. The girl kept walking, her eyes focused ahead, breathing controlled, mind calculating each next step. She knew that this moment could change everything. The dog remained firm, its body positioned between the girl and the adult, protecting her with trained precision. The handler's calm commands and subtle gestures guided the dog with absolute accuracy. He could see the signals she had sent and understood the courage it had taken for her to act silently. Every tiny movement, every subtle adjustment, was part of a chain reaction that had now brought the girl to a position of relative safety. The adult began to sense that their attempts to control her were futile. Panic flickered in their eyes, masked by frustration and anger. A few people around started to whisper to each other. They noticed the dog's unusual stance, the careful movements of the handler, the stillness of the girl amid the shifting crowd. Yet no one could see the signals she had sent. No one could feel the fear she had carefully hidden. Only the dog and the handler understood the gravity of the situation. The girl's silent courage had reached the right ears, the right eyes, and it was creating a path towards safety. the adult tried one more time to pull her forcefully. But the dog shifted slightly, blocking the attempt with flawless timing. The growl deepened, and the handler's gentle command reinforced the dog's position. The girl remained outwardly calm, a quiet anchor in the storm. Inside, her heart pounded, adrenaline coursed through her veins. And yet she felt a fragile hope, the first in a long while. She realized that her silent signals, her courage, and the dog's trained response had brought her this far. It was enough to keep going. The adult hesitated, recognizing that every effort to control the girl was being countered. The dog's eyes stayed fixed, unwavering, and the handler's subtle control ensured that nothing escaped their notice. The girl's calm movements continued to send invisible cues, a silent conversation with the dog that only they could understand. She felt a small surge of relief, knowing that she was being protected, that her bravery had not been wasted, and that help had arrived in the form she could never have expected. In those tense seconds, the adult's frustration escalated, but so did their awareness of being outmaneuvered. The dog subtly adjusted its stance again, maintaining the barrier and watching every movement. The handler's voice remained quiet, commanding, and precise. The girl's breathing remained controlled, her steps deliberate. The invisible thread of communication between her and the dog was alive and strong. Every micro-gesture she made reinforced the dog's protective actions. The handler interpreted them with skill and calm. Suddenly, the adult stopped. Their attempts to control her had failed, and they were aware that the situation was being observed by the dog, the handler, and now increasingly by the surrounding crowd. Some onlookers began to take notice, sensing the tension and the dog's unwavering focus. But no one could see the signals, could not understand the silent courage of a small girl guiding a trained police dog. The girl kept moving slowly, each step measured. Her calm facade, masking the intense fear she still felt, yet inside a flicker of hope grew stronger. The handler, seeing the adult hesitate, decided it was time to act. He leaned slightly forward, giving the dog a subtle command. The dog responded instantly, positioning itself to guide the girl safely away from the adult. The adult's attempts to regain control were completely neutralized. The girl remained composed, her silent signals continuing to direct the dog's movements. Her courage, quiet and precise, created a chain of protection that could not be broken. The adult realized they could not continue. Panic became visible in their face. They tried one last time to exert control, but the dog, guided by the handler and responding to the girl's hidden signals, blocked every attempt. The girl stayed calm, keeping her steps slow and deliberate, allowing the dog to take the lead in creating a safe path. Her mind calculated each move, each micro-gesture. Knowing that any mistake could cost her safety, the crowd around began to notice more clearly. People stepped back, some whispered to each other, others stared in curiosity. The girl, walking calmly, her expression serene, looked like an ordinary child, but the reality was extraordinary. She had communicated danger without words, directed a trained police dog, kept herself safe in a situation that could have ended badly in seconds. Her silent courage had been enough to change the outcome. The handler guided the dog carefully, maintaining a protective barrier and directing the girl toward safety. Each step, each subtle adjustment was precise. The dog's ears, eyes, and body language were tuned to the girl's movements, responding instantly. The adult could no longer interfere. The tension that had gripped them faded into frustration and fear. The girl's courage, her silent communication, and the dog's trained response had triumphed. As they moved further, the adult's resistance waned. The handler used calm, firm commands to guide the dog, keeping the girl safe. She remained composed, every gesture controlled, every step deliberate. Her small act of bravery, the hidden signals she had sent, had guided trained professionals and a skilled dog to act effectively. The moment of danger was passing, replaced by the relief of safety. The crowd now noticed, murmuring some clapping quietly, understanding that something remarkable had occurred. The girl finally allowed herself a tiny exhale of relief. Though she stayed outwardly calm, the dog, responsive and alert, maintained its protective stance until the adult was fully neutralized. The handler acknowledged the girl silently, a nod of understanding and respect for her courage and intelligence. The invisible communication that had started with a small drop of an object and a tap of her shoe had succeeded completely. For the girl, the reality of safety began to settle in. Her heart still raced, but the fear that had gripped her for so long was easing. She had acted quietly, bravely, and strategically. Her hidden signals had been understood, her courage recognized, and she had survived. The handler and the dog had executed their training perfectly, but it was her courage that had made it possible. The crowd, now fully aware, could only watch and whisper in awe at the remarkable sequence of events they had just witnessed. The adult, now unable to exert any control, was guided away by authorities, their frustration evident but powerless. The girl remained calm, walking beside the handler and the dog, finally free from the immediate danger that had haunted her steps. Her small, silent act had created a ripple that ensured her safety and showed the power of courage. Even in the smallest and quietest forms, the dog, her silent protector, stayed by her side, alert and ready, until complete safety was confirmed. In the end, the small girl had turned a quiet signal into a life-saving action. She had communicated danger without words, acted with precision, and trusted a trained dog and a handler to respond. The moments that had felt eternal now resolved into safety, relief, and the quiet recognition of her bravery. It was a lesson in courage, patience, and the extraordinary power of a small act done with determination and intelligence. The world around her returned to its ordinary rhythm, but for her, everything had changed forever. She had survived. She had acted with courage. And she had shown that even the smallest, quietest actions could have a monumental impact.